In the early hours of January 17, 1991, the skies over Iraq lit up as coalition forces launched an extensive air campaign to liberate Kuwait from Iraqi occupation. This marked the beginning of Operation Desert Storm, a significant military operation that had been months in the making and that would profoundly shape the geopolitical landscape of the Middle East for years to come. Beginning in August of 1990, Iraqi forces, under the command of President Saddam Hussein, invaded Kuwait, a small but oil-rich neighboring nation. Saddam justified the invasion by citing historical claims over Kuwaiti territory and accusing the Kuwaiti government of manipulating oil prices, which he claimed was harming Iraq's already fragile economy. At the time, Iraq was struggling to recover from the devastating 8-year Iran-Iraq war, which left it deeply in debt. Kuwait, on the other hand, was one of the wealthiest countries in the region due to its vast oil reserves. The international community, led by the United Nations, responded swiftly to Iraq's invasion. On August 6, 1990, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 661, imposing economic sanctions on Iraq and demanding the immediate withdrawal of Iraqi troops from Kuwait. Despite the international pressure, Saddam Hussein refused to retreat, solidifying his intentions to annex Kuwait and make it Iraq's 19th province. The United States, under President George H.W. Bush, quickly took the lead in organizing a coalition of 39 countries to oppose Iraq's aggression. The coalition included major NATO allies such as the United Kingdom and France, as well as regional Arab powers like Saudi Arabia and Egypt. With strong backing from the UN, this multinational coalition began preparations for a large-scale military intervention if diplomatic efforts failed. This initial operation was dubbed Operation Desert Shield. Starting on August 7, 1990, Operation Desert Shield aimed to protect Saudi Arabia from a potential Iraqi invasion. As Iraq's forces amassed along the Saudi border, the US sent tens of thousands of troops to the region, gradually building up a military presence. This build-up continued over the following months as the coalition forces prepared for a possible offensive. With the deadline for Iraq's withdrawal set by the UN expiring on January 15, 1991, Operation Desert Storm commenced 2 days later with a massive aerial bombardment that targeted Iraqi military infrastructure, communication networks, and supply lines. The coalition deployed more than 2,000 aircraft in the skies over Iraq and Kuwait. The air campaign, which lasted 38 days, crippled Iraq's air defenses and left its forces in disarray. Precision-guided munitions, often referred to as smart bombs, played a critical role in minimizing civilian casualties while targeting military installations with surgical precision. After the air campaign had significantly degraded Iraq's capacity to wage war, the coalition forces launched a ground offensive on February 24, 1991. The ground war, unlike the air campaign, was short and decisive, lasting only 100 hours before Iraqi forces were completely overwhelmed. The coalition's strategy for the ground war, often referred to as the left hook, was a masterstroke in military planning. While Iraqi forces were heavily fortified along the Kuwaiti-Saudi border, the coalition feigned a direct assault before swinging westward, bypassing the main Iraqi defenses and cutting off their escape routes. This encirclement trapped a significant portion of Iraq's elite Republican Guard units, preventing them from retreating back to Baghdad. The rapid pace of the coalition's advance led to the swift liberation of Kuwait City on February 27, 1991. Saddam Hussein, realizing his forces were no match for the coalition, ordered a retreat. However, during their withdrawal, Iraqi forces set fire to over 600 Kuwaiti oil wells, creating an environmental disaster that would take years to remedy. The Gulf War saw a massive mobilization of troops and equipment on both sides. The coalition, led by the United States, assembled a force of 950,000 troops, supported by over 3,000 tanks, 1,800 aircraft, and 2,200 artillery pieces. Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, fielded an army of 600,000 troops, 5,500 tanks, 700 aircraft, and 3,000 artillery units. Despite Iraq's larger number of tanks and artillery, the war's outcome was decisive. Coalition forces sustained relatively low losses. 292 soldiers were killed, with 776 wounded. They also lost 31 tanks, 75 aircraft, and 32 vehicles. Iraqi losses were far more severe. Between 20,000 and 50,000 troops were killed, with 75,000 wounded and up to 150,000 captured. Iraq lost 3,300 tanks, 110 aircraft, 2,200 vehicles, and 19 ships. Although Operation Desert Storm was hailed as a military success, its long-term effects were complex and far-reaching. One of the most significant outcomes was the reaffirmation of U.S. military dominance in the post-Cold War world. The quick and decisive victory elevated the reputation of the U.S. armed forces and restored confidence in their capabilities following the Vietnam War. However, while the war succeeded in liberating Kuwait, it did not remove Saddam Hussein from power. The Iraqi leader remained in control of Iraq for another 12 years, until he was deposed in the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. The continued presence of US forces in Saudi Arabia during and after the conflict fueled growing anti-American sentiment, which played a role in the rise of extremist groups like Al-Qaeda. This resentment culminated in the tragic attacks on September 11, 2001, leading to a broader US military presence in the Middle East. America's involvement in the region would expand through subsequent conflicts, including the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, shaping US foreign policy for decades. Operation Desert Storm stands as a pivotal moment in modern military history. The coalition's swift and decisive action, led by the United States, not only liberated Kuwait, but also showcased the power of international cooperation and modern warfare tactics. Yet the conflict's aftermath left a complex legacy, with the enduring presence of US forces in the Middle East, shaping regional dynamics for decades to come. What began as a mission to liberate a small nation would ripple across history, influencing the geopolitical landscape and America's role in the region for years.